Lockdown fail. Policy fails against reality. Flatten the curve was the mantra that got us into lockdown. So how well has it done? Note to censors, we use only government data. If you have a problem with the results, speak to the government. We're focusing on compiling a report based on our work. It's time to get on with our lives in the new post-democracy era. However, we'll still be doing updates, likely weekly, and occasional pieces of interest as we do research for the report. Remember this, how we were supposed to give up democracy to flatten the curve, all to save lives? I figured I'd take a look at the theory of what was supposed to happen. We already know from our earlier work that the reported cases ceased to look like a virus from peak onwards. Far from flattening, cases now exceeded the no lockdown curve by a substantial margin. By mid-May, the entire contagion should have been over. Instead, at the end of May, we may graciously be allowed out in groups of 6 if we're lucky. All because someone decided that reporting a normal virus would be mundane, and even then it would have been a normal virus lockdown fail. Our growth decay analysis long ago showed the same thing, that someone decided that we weren't going to have a normal peak and decline. Far from the growth rate decaying post-peak, it stayed precisely level and consistently ever higher than the normal new cases growth rate, giving us ever more inconsistent new cases per day. But what was supposed to happen? I couldn't help being curious. So here's an official flattening the curve infographic. Remember, it's not about stopping the virus, but about slowing the onset of the contagion so that the peak cases are reduced and hospitals aren't overwhelmed. So here are two curves, the first to mirror the UK cases, as we'll show in a second, and the second having two changes. The mean peak date is pushed out a month, and the standard deviation is doubled to give a broader curve. If we'd simply pushed the peak out a month and not changed the standard deviation, the peak would have been just as high a month later. Now I have to say as I write this that it's easy enough to make that modification on an infographic. But why should it reflect reality? There's no reason why lockdown is supposed to push the mean out 30 days or double the standard deviation. It's just someone's idea of a nice infographic. That's about all it is apparently. Here's UK cases, and you can see how we chose the first curve to match up to 31st March, lockdown plus 8 days for incubation, during which old cases are working through. You can already see this isn't going to end well. The purple tracks pretty well to 31st March, so it's a reasonable fit, but the virus or reported figures don't in any way level off below the original curve. Quite the opposite. Now what's supposed to happen, playing their game, is that we're supposed to go from old curve to new curve, and that change will peak at the 5 to 10 day incubation period. It makes sense that that transition will be a mini normal distribution of its own, a few infections reduced on lockdown day, a few after 15 days, but most between 5 and 10 days, with a peak at 7.5 days post-lockdown. So let's say that the day 1 percentage of new cases is 1%, then we take 99% of the cases from the old curve and 1% of the cases from the new curve. At peak 7.5 days, we're taking 50-50, half and half from the old and the new. And at 15 days, we're taking, say, 99% new and only 1% old. And after that, only new cases. Frankly, it's a short-lived transition, so we could have simply adopted new cases after day 8, say, but this seemed in keeping with the way it's supposed to be, normal, elegant. Notice how as the new curve bites, we get a substantial drop from the old curve down to the new curve, and then it rises again on the new curve. It's an elegant and rather attractive graph, and distinctive. It has a whole middle-aged man lying on the beach thing going for it. Yep, excellent fit. A sort of praying mantis hovers over middle-aged man on beach thing. If that's what was supposed to happen versus what did happen, I'd say that was a lockdown fail. No, hardly a surprise, but where it was going anyway prior to lockdown still fits rather better, so lockdown had no effect, as we already know. And then it decides that being a virus is lame, or someone decides they don't need to play nice anymore. Maybe they've realised the public and media are really that stupid and compliant. But hey, maybe it's testing and deaths were fine. Let's take a peek. So similar curves but not identical. We have to map to fewer deaths and set to a new mean, the peak of deaths, not the peak of cases. Then choose the standard deviation to match the curve to the actual. That looks like this, with again deaths to 31st March according pretty well with our blue line, or vice versa, so there's our no lockdown curve. As before, the flattened curve is 30 days out with double standard deviation, else it would be the same height and just as narrow. It's pretty obvious we've got the same problem. Those deaths never did cut across to the new curve. And if you think that's what you're seeing, hey, death dropped to the maximum of the flattened curve, it worked. No. As before, we have that dinky little crossover as the deaths curve leaves the old curve and transitions to the new, flatter curve. Yup, really good fit. Now it's a middle-aged man asleep in front of a very jagged Mount Kilimanjaro. Not really what we'd call a good fit. And what's with the insane jagged death data? Law of large numbers, variations decline and smooth out with real data. Not here, apparently. But hey, it has long been apparent that the reported figures are fake news, and by doing deaths analysis, we know it can't be excused as testing. We have a double whammy, a complete and utter lockdown fail, with neither cases nor deaths looking like at the flattened curve. Yet how many news reports have insisted that lockdown is working? Media is lying. Go figure. And I would remind the censor that these are the official figures and the official policy claims for lockdown and flattening the curve. If you don't like the results, go speak to the government. It's their data, their claims. So there you go. Massive lockdown fail in cases, massive lockdown fail in deaths, non-viral fraudulent data in both cases. Don't worry about it, it's just the world we now live in. Better keep writing my report and document this for posterity. I'm still Andrew Mather, a 6-year-old Brit, mathematician, financier, technologist, husband, biker, pilot, healer, whatever. Feel free to get in touch, andrew@peerlessreads.com or andrew@amather.com. Either should get to me.